We're even wearing different clothes today. Normally, we both have our black hoodies on.
I did that on purpose too.
Oh, I did not. I just
Changed the hoodie, shaved a little bit, freshly pulled back the hair.
I straightened mine.
Yeah,
Nah.
look at you. All right.
All right. So, Shen Shenanigans, episode 4. I don't even know where we're at. I think episode 4. Let me double check.
Yeah, I believe it's episode 4.
I think we decided one of the things we were going to do. I lost myself. Hang on. I can no longer see me. Man,
Acupuncture is fantastic for finding yourself.
we were doing so good, and I don't know where my browser went.
You're still on the
I
screen.
know.
Don't
All
make
right.
any goofy faces.
There I am. All right. Cool.
There you
Good
go.
talk. I think with this one, we were talking about starting with giving the tea that we're drinking a little bit more of a platform, as well as just some clinic updates and weekly wins and those types of things before we dive in too far with our topic. Today, we're on an oolong kick right now. So anybody watching this is going to know that we are once again talking about oolongs. But today we're drinking our sun-kissed oolongs, which is just we're enjoying the tea for some of the lightness of it and transition into spring. It's also a little fruitier. I think it smells like Captain Crunch. I just discovered that today. I've been trying to put my finger on it you guys won't be able to smell this, but yeah. So anything to say about our oolong and our,
I'll share what the ingredients are in
yeah,
it. We don't have to read all of them.
yeah.
But
So,
just the highlight.
so oolong, hibiscus, rose hips, malva flowers, which was something that I don't really know what that is, and raspberry pieces. So it's a little tart, little sweet. It's a nice light flavor. The color is also very light. You can see that. But yeah, oolong is making us feel like legit acupuncturist in our tea drinking instead of just the banana bread is one of our favorite teas. Yeah. Cool. Nothing to say, nothing to add. You're like, no,
Available at Nerdy
tasty.
Girl Tea.
That was okay.
We should plug where they can get it.
Yeah.
And now what we're supposed to do on these things.
It's our other hat with the tea. So yeah, we'll drop it in the comments. Is this the first time we're gonna say that? We're gonna drop it in the comments below our video.
Podcast. Are you supposed to smash the like button and all that stuff too?
How
does all that work?
actually
That's
not.
YouTube.
Yeah.
Anyhow,
All right.
here we are.
We are.
It is a tasty tea. I like it. It's nice for as we're into spring, and the lightness of it is lovely.
We got a little farther than the one we did last time because we landed on it was tasty. That was about all we had to say.
We've talked a little bit about the tea this week as we continue to. We've joked about it becoming a tea collection more than as a tea shop, and how some of our palate has changed since day one.
Yeah.
I'm not sure this is a tea we would have appreciated in the beginning, but
I would agree with that.
it's nice.
All right, cool. Updates. We started another podcast in case you didn't know that. We're giving the gym hat of what we do its own space to grow we're expecting there to be some overlap in conversation, but while we're expecting to get into a little bit of mindful movement and things within this space, we also wanted to give CrossFit its own container. And so refining the 33 is where we'll be covering more CrossFit and fitness and still mindset and life oriented, but through a different lens than just the acupuncture and more medical side of what we do. So if there's any sort of interest or intrigue in what the heck we are even doing with that, would be a great place to follow. So last week we recorded our first episode for that podcast, which you guys can find. So, and then, so clinic updates, not really any updates. We're still doing the same thing. Any wins for you this past week? Anything notable that would be fun to share?
No, the patients are doing well. It's nice to see patients reaching goals and life shifting for them and things that are, I feel like things are going well in the clinic. There's been some topics come up that we probably won't touch on today, but some stuff that And just make sure you're building a good team around you. They include your acupuncturist, of course, but also those that have been on a topic of conversation this week is make sure that the people that are on your team are supporting you. And I think we've touched on that in the past, so we won't go too far down that rabbit hole. But that's really what came out of the clinic last week was a lot of discussions about making sure you're surrounding yourself with good people who are going to take care of you. So I guess it sort of leads into the topic today.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's good.
I'm getting started with kind of a wave of new people, which is nice. It's always nice to have new patients coming in, but our kind of process of getting started with people is always so interesting and getting to learn them. We've had in the last probably month, 4, 6 weeks, we got set up through the VA to receive referrals for veterans and military, uh, specifically through the VA system. So we've got a couple of those coming in, which is fun because that work is so close and some of my favorite work to do. No offense to my non-vets, but so that it's been fun to get started with a couple people there within that and see what we can do to help. But yeah,
Well, I think it's showing some promise. We were involved with we had patients coming in from the VA when we were in South Carolina, and we had some patients get their rug, and it was disheartening. So that we've slow dripped that here. We're still doing all the free stuff we do for vets and in-house programs, but it was through feedback from the veterans in the community that they appreciate the care they're getting through that network here. We had decided to pursue that. So we're a little slow getting started on it, but hopefully it will turn out the way. Yeah, we've got some good feedback that they do a good job taking care of people here. So we're happy to be on board with that and to continue doing the work that we appreciate doing with them guys and gals.
yeah,
But yeah.
cool topic for the day.
Mm.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think part of our intention with today is to open up some dialogue around terminology, language, different, I don't know, I don't even know how you would describe it, but just some different things that we hear, terms that we use, but also we know patients come in with. And I don't know, it's not even like what it means, but how we use them and are cautious to use them sometimes.
They're not bad.
Yeah.
It's not bad
No,
terminology.
no.
It's terminology that we steer away from because they've become cliche.
Yeah.
I think an interesting way to maybe start this topic, I thought about this before we started, was the idea that I remember we had a patient back home in South Carolina. He was actually a vet, which that was a nice segue. But he was blown away by the results he was getting and how much better he felt, how much less pain and all of the things. And I remember sitting in the pharmacy in our old office and him coming out of the room. He said, "Man," he says, "you guys have to tell everybody about this." And I remember he was a good guy. We had good rapport and he stuck around and we had a little bit of a conversation. We had some space to have that conversation. And the conversation led to, but how do you talk to people and convince people that this is a system of medicine that can be beneficial to you on a lot of different levels? And how do you find the words to say it and convince them without using all the cliches that are out there in medicine right now? Because I can say it to you and I can wholeheartedly mean it when I say to you that I can help you with what you have going on. But everybody else is saying it too. And some practitioners are fantastic, some are not. I had a boss tell me one time, he says, "Don't forget, not everybody got straight A's in medical school." So, that goes back to the team comment as well. But I think the topic we talked about today was like, how do we find the words to talk about the things that we do and convince people that this can be helpful without going down the list of all of the cliches and saying the same thing everybody else is saying. And we oftentimes will err on the side of not saying it at all because I don't want to just be it's the difference between marketing and having a conversation with somebody to convince them that you can be helpful. And so I think we probably prepared a small list or words that we know that we try to avoid, or at least if they do come out, like I cringe when I say some of them. And how do we as practitioners find the space to communicate without it being a cliche? And how do we make sure that we're doing it from a place of taking care of people and not just trying to build our practices? So
But it's so interesting too. And I know, and I don't think you mean this word in that way, but convince is such an interesting term, right? Because
yeah,
we're real big on just letting our work speak for itself, which I think is why we get so quiet and potentially less forceful with using the words. And I'm going to throw like another type of terminology in there, like beyond the cliche, we refer to them. We've probably done it less here, but when we were in South Carolina, we used to call them the buzzwords. And those are also interesting because they are, I do think that most practitioners, when they use them, they mean them. Like, I think there's probably a couple different sets where, yeah, it's the terminology that is the marketing tactic to draw people in. And that's not ever how we intend to use them. And so I do think that there's a piece of that, right? And then there's also belief in the work and what you're doing, finding ways to connect with people. On the other end of that, I think so many people that are looking for help are also looking for those buzzwords when they're communicating with providers to be the thing that confirms that they need to explore that treatment. And so you're looking for that. And we had, uh, I don't know if it was the first episode or the second episode we released, where we talked a little bit about the connection with Western medicine and kind of the challenging state that healthcare, is, whether it's conventional healthcare, alternative, integrative, name your health option. And so I think the more challenged someone is within their own health journey, the more closely they grasp to needing to hear that buzzword from a provider in order to confirm that they should even walk through the door. Well, we've never really had that conversation, but it just popped into my head of not using them, right, has trade-offs. But then there's also the like, how do we make sure we're not saying it just to talk someone in the door and then what does it actually mean? Right. So yeah, do you have our list? We want to dive into
no, so
the
an idea just popped in my head. We'll get to the first word, which will probably be a favorite as we start. But I know there's a lot of times in use of some of these words that it's the idea that if everybody's special, nobody's special. It's sort of concept. So with that in mind, start with the word holistic.
Oh, big one. You really
And then
are
we start with just, let's just come out of the
amazing.
gates
All
swinging.
right.
And it is, there's different definitions. There's different ideas. Everybody's using it. And and of course we have people looking for holistic practitioners and holistic medicine and all of those types of things. But it is one that feels like we get overused a lot. But and if every aspect of healthcare is holistic, then it's all equal across the board, and there's nobody. I don't think anybody. We're not trying to convince anybody to stop using it, but I think the message that we want to come through today is dig a little deeper, look a little closer into it, and try to ask your practitioner what they mean by holistic.
Eh,
That that might be a nice
ooh,
way to
that
do it
one. Yeah.
because we can sit. I would love to sit and have that conversation. We're not going to have a little bit of it today, but if you ask me, I'll give you an answer.
Think as we dive down this road, it is important to say like none of this is about, oh, if you're using the term, like you're wrong. And we're also in no way claiming that like acupuncture and Chinese medicine gets the stake on holistic. Because there's a lot of people, there's a lot of practitioners within our field that also we've experienced like overusing the word. And that's not really, and we're probably not opening this door today.
Root cause.
But yeah, between there's and I don't know how much of the general public, right, knows the divide that kind of happens within our field, but there's different types of acupuncture and Chinese medicine, and some of them practice a more holistic style than others. And we all think that we can practice holistic medicine. And yeah, root cause is the other one that is a nice segue. But none of this conversation, as we get a little deeper into it, is intended to be any sort of judgment on using it or saying that like you don't have the right to use it. But I do think that it's important, like you just said, for the lay person, right, that's seeking care and treatment and support within their health journey to ask their provider, you have the right to ask the question. And you should also be satisfied with the answer based on what you think you're looking for. And my brain just went a conversation I had with somebody recently, but it's like you as the patient are the one that's in charge of your health, right? You're the one that's building your team and you don't have to agree with their definition of the word holistic or how they approach care, but it should be in alignment with what you're seeking for yourself. So I just feel like this is probably going to be our first topic that gets a little edgy and potentially controversial around our opinions. And we've both been practicing for, I'm coming up on a decade. You've been practicing for 12 years now, right? And so, as much as we can agree to disagree, change minds, right? Whatever, that comes from our clinical practice and experience. And we've been doing it long enough, I think, to plant these flags. And at the end of the day, they're still just our opinions, right? Like yeah,
I think what I would like to see come out of the conversation, I'm not trying to pick on anybody or start any squabbles. I want to, we set out to do this because we want to talk about healthcare from our perspective. We want to talk about patient care and why we've always been focused on patient care. Let's just build our practice, focus on patient care, and everything else will work itself out. And part of those for patients is to make sure that they can advocate for themselves and they can have honest conversations. We've probably said that already somewhere, to have honest conversations with their practitioners. And I think sometimes those conversations should go beyond the cliches. And if it sounds cliche or it's there, well, then ask more information, because you should be able to connect with your practitioners, whoever they are, and get more information. And then the challenge to our profession is, as you're building your practice,
live up to it.
is make sure that part of that is about making sure you connect with them in a way to where you feel like the rapport is on point and you can connect with them and they can ask you anything they want to ask you. And you can sit and doesn't mean you have to agree with everything they say. You won't always agree with everything, but at least you should be able to leave that conversation feeling like you spent time with them, you connected with them. And, which I think is really what I think about when I think about not using all those catch terms, is because they're easy to say. And in other words, we're taught them, and it's great for marketing and it's great for the flyers and it's great for all the communication. But are we really connecting with people when they come in, and are we hearing them? Are we meeting them where they are? Are we meeting their needs and all of that? So I'm not sure how much of that's really about using or not using cliche, but it's the level of like when we communicate with
I think
people.
it's important to say, I think,
Yeah.
because we probably talked about this in one of the early recordings. Part of the reason we have hesitated to do this for so long is because we do have very strong opinions about the things that we have strong opinions about. And it's not, we love the conversation and the dialogue. And I think sometimes we want to hear something or see something and instantly just be like, that's wrong. I don't agree with that. Like, all right, let's say why. And that's sometimes an inviting response to some people. And it's a very annoying response to others because you also have your opinions. And so can we engage in dialogue around this? And just going back to those what ifs. It's what if a patient walks in and asks you how you define the word holistic? Can you define it for them? Do you have a relationship with what that means to you for them? And if you don't, think about it. Start developing that relationship because it may, or maybe we've just lost touch with it. We have, oh gosh, like when patients come in, right, they challenge certain aspects of ourselves. They do with them the work that we do. And it forces us to look at that. Maybe you've been practicing for so long that you just say it and don't really think about it and haven't thought about it for a while. Has that changed for you over the years and what that actually means? And so I do think this is an important part of the conversation. And yeah, agree, disagree. That's cool. Let's have a conversation. Like reach out, right? Whatever that may be. But this, as much as this is about speaking to people within our field or other providers in other fields that may be listening, this is also for the person who is seeking, again, that support team within their care. And It's more important to me that we give them permission to ask questions and explore, and we get asked them all the time, right? And hopefully that helps you in your journey if that is a place that you find yourself in. So I think it would be interesting. Like, how do you define holistic, right? Because people listening, that's going to be like, great, you just spent all this time, but what does it mean to you? I don't know. What does holistic mean to you, James?
I think, oh, here's me pulling out another cliche, body, mind, spirit. Like, how many times have we heard
Yeah.
that? Now, there's an aspect of our medicine that is people come in for back pain, people come in for shoulder pain, people come in for sleep issues, people come in for digestion issues. And as we dig into things, I'm also going to ask about all the other things that are going on in the system. We're going to check in and see how the entire system's functioning. And our role as the way we practice the medicine is to try to discover that thing that has tipped the scale and caused a little bit of imbalance in the entirety of the system. I think a good example of the holism of our medicine is
Ooh, that's a
the fact that you
word.
like that one.
That's good.
I avoided the other one by
Oh,
saying it. I think one of the examples of that within our medicine is regardless of what we're treating, if you come in on day one and your back pain's not better, and you come in on day two and it's getting better, but it's not quite there, and you come in on day three and it's still improving, but not quite there, also expect your energy to have improved. I expect your digestion to have improved. I expect your sleep to have improved. And I expect your stress levels or your mood or the way you're experiencing the world to have shifted in a way that feels less stressful. Even if none of those things are what you asked for, I think when you set the entirety of the system right, or you're just moving it back into place and readjusting and recalibrating so that things are more balanced for the entirety of the system, which trying to avoid using the other word. I think it has an effect on all of it. And understanding that, then yeah, it includes the body and the physical stuff. It includes the mental, the stress levels and the anxiety and all those sorts of things. But this is also a spirit-based medicine. I don't use this terminology. It's a heart-based medicine. We're trying to get to the core of things and move the needle in a way that not only helps your back feel better, but also makes your heart feel better. And even if your heart already feels great, I've had people tell me like,
we'll
heart.
get there.
Yeah. I remember a patient once upon a time that we did really good work with. She was an MS. She would deal with MS for years. She was also a veteran, very skeptical, but she started feeling better and all of those sorts of things. And we had this conversation one day about what is the purpose of all this? And my goal is to help you feel like your best self, like like as good as you've ever felt. And I remember there were tears and I don't ever remember feeling this well. And to me, that's pretty impactful. And yeah, but that was this individual, and it's not the only story. It's multiple stories over multiple years that I think when you're treating a person that way, it's amazing to watch what happens for them, regardless of what they come in for. I'm not choosing what I'm choosing for. We're just going to treat you and recalibrate and get things back in order. And when the pieces fall into place that way, it's beautiful to watch. And it's beautiful on a lot of different levels beyond just, hey, I helped the back pain. So that to me is what I think holistic approach should be. I think I think it should feel better in a lot of different aspects of where you are and who you are and how you're showing up in the world and what home feels like and what joy feels like and all of those sorts of things. And along the way, we're also talking about, hey, what kind of foods can we shift to? And hey, what kind of herbs can we layer in? And hey, what's your activity levels look like? And how do we touch back on those Yang Shen aspects and start thinking about that's the 5 aspects of that, all of that. And really, it is the picture of health that we hold for people, I think, which makes a difference. Didn't really answer your question,
That's
I don't
okay.
think, but I think it's a nice example.
There's a piece of that too that I think when we get into the goal of how patients are feeling, there's a peaceful presence that kind of happens and this sense of settledness and exhale partnered with just feeling grounded and capable of handling life, right? It's part of what is so tricky about some of the mental emotional work and some of the life work that we do. I tell patients all the time, I can't make your life less stressful, right? If you're stuck in a job that is like you don't like your boss or you're struggling with coworkers, you don't even like the work that you're doing, right? There's no needle in theory that is going to just suddenly make you fall in love with your job and enjoy your boss more and all of these things. But the stress that you're feeling from that and the anxiety and the overwhelm is all very real. And what if part of what the needles do is help you connect with that place inside yourself in which you can say, This is not what I want my life to look like." And so then you start making different choices and decisions to move in a different direction. What if I got a job somewhere else? Or what if XYZ, whatever that means, right? But the headaches and the digestive things that you're experiencing, your body's absorbing that stress and it's reacting. For one person, it may be headaches. For another person, it's sleep. For somebody else, it's shoulder pain, right? And not everything is psychological, right? Not every ache and pain and disharmony that we have is from an emotional one, but it is a factor, which I think is where we start layering in the holistic piece too, right? You quickly dropped my body, mind, spirit, right? And it's physical. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding of what we actually do when it comes to the body as acupuncturists. I know a lot of the conversations that we have with random people is, oh, so you're just working with the nervous system. You're working with the nerves. And to clarify, that's the one thing that we're trained not to stick needles in, by the way, is we want to avoid the nerves at all costs. And no, can we help regulate the nervous system? Absolutely. But that doesn't involve sticking needles in nerves. That's how we're regulating through our collection of points. Then there's another hat where it's, oh, you're working with the muscles to release tension. Like sometimes, right? But that is also just a piece. And when we think about the body level, we work with each and every single aspect of our physical being: respiratory system, cardiovascular, nervous, muscular, endocrine, right? All of that is there. The only thing we can't, I won't say can't, but probably are not doing is healing bones, right? And there's another hat of our herbal lens where we have lots of herbs that are great for building bone and strengthening bones. And I don't recommend you coming to us if you fell off the ski slope and broke your leg, go to the emergency room. But when you're ready to start healing, come see us because we have herbs and acupuncture that are great for helping that system repair itself. And when we think about that hat, that is just the physical level. We haven't even started to touch mental, emotional, life, spiritual, as just the direction you connected with as well. But when we are on target and on path to, you just can't help yourself. You have to pitch it. It makes me
Uh,
crazy. But when we're on path to helping someone, like their physical body feels good, but there really isn't words to fully encompass the, I'm gonna steal your word, the holism of what somebody is feeling internally that, yeah, it looks great on paper because they're not hurting, things are moving, they're sleeping, we're checking all the boxes. But and this is language we get repeated back to us. I just feel more at ease and I feel like myself. And man, my husband is driving me crazy, but I also didn't feel like wanted to clobber him over the head with the pots and pans out of the kitchen. That is also that's healing, and that is work. And it's not the husband that brought them in; it was the shoulder pain, and it's chicken or the egg, right? What is causing what? And sometimes we can draw those straight lines. And at the end of the day, it's all kind of influencing itself. So I think for me, getting into that holistic terminology is, yeah, physically you feel good, but you're also just at peace with life and not, I'm at peace with life because my body doesn't hurt. I'm at peace with life and my body doesn't hurt because that's the chicken or the egg piece, right? Like, any other profession, right? Like, yeah, people are going to feel better if their bodies feel better. But what if we can help them as a person just feel better and their pain goes away? So it's, yeah, I don't know where we were going with that. But I think we're
I,
trying
th-
to define holistic, right? Like our viewpoint in that.
I think I think what's the way this is going to end up going is we're going to not define holistic, and we're going to give examples of what I consider or what we consider that to be in a person. That at least feels like where this is headed. The gentleman who asked us told us we should tell everybody about this, and this is about where we started was, hey, we should use words. And well, what words do you use? And the response, I thought I should just circle back and say, the response we give this gentleman. So I need you to tell him. As you tell him, you share your experience. Talk about the benefits that you've received. Talk about how good you feel. Talk about how amazed you are, how good you feel, and how gentle it is. Because most people are scared of needles on some level. Um, the patient's words are more important than our words in that. And I also recognize that if we're building a practice, we have to use words to describe it. But it has been difficult. We're a decade into this, and it is difficult at times to find a way to express that. I love the example of using I talked about the one lady. I had another lady tell me one time that she just something felt different. I don't know what's different, but I was sitting in traffic and noticed my knuckles weren't turning white holding the steering wheel.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's a good one. I was like, I love that for you. I love the fact that you're just a little more at ease in those moments. Those are the things we wish we could just, yeah,
Pull up and share.
bottle up and relay that to
And
them.
in some ways we are. And with that, like you mentioned the decade with the practice, like the approach is done well, right? Like we ran a very successful clinic in South Carolina. We've done really great since we've been here. And so I think that's part of it too, is like as a provider, right? Don't feel like you have to sell someone on something. Just show up and be yourself and be present and believe in what you're doing and do good work. Like those two things, you can believe in it, but you have to follow through. But if you're doing good work again is going to speak for itself. And this is funny, you sharing that story, because the one that pops in my head was one of our vets that got us connected to a veteran organization in South Carolina. And because we were connecting to them on an organizational level, probably shared a little more than I typically patients of how this work's going to go and shared it, was honest in the conversation. And this is how this may go. Like with our veteran work, it's often a different experience than people who were not in the service, but we have that kind of like backing. And I remember sharing with them that, like, hey, like these first couple treatments we're going to do are intended to help let go of anything that we've been through, gone through, putting down, so that we can feel a little lighter and move forward and get more targeted with our work. This is a bigger conversation for another day. But this is what this gentleman was told. And we went through it and I was like, hey, if you need anything, reach out, call. Like I can chat you through anything that you may be feeling from these treatments. And we did the treatment and he called the next day and we talked through it and was having just some remembrance of things that he had seen while he was in the service, and talked through it, gave some practices, got him back in the treatment room, did the next stages of that. And I remember that conversation communicating that, like, I need you to trust that this isn't going to be the experience, right? Forever. We're not always going to have And to be clear, the memories that come up are not re-triggering or traumatizing. It's an interesting, oh, this is something I haven't thought about for years. And as we were doing this work and we got through those, things were great. In fact, he went back to school and decided he wanted to open his own business. And there's all of these things that kind of unfolded over the course of probably like a year and a half, maybe. And it was great. And he was in a great place. Body felt good. Mental health, he was still seeing his counselor and was making great strides and counseling, and everything was just great. And before we moved, I remember having a conversation with him about, he was like, when I first come in, you told me how this was gonna go. He's like, I didn't believe you. And he was like, and but you didn't lie. Like everything that kind of unfolded, right, was like, yeah, it was an interesting journey of working with some of the mental health stuff and some of the trauma that he was healing from his time in the service. And, but you're right, like it's gone exactly the way you said. And he asked, he's like, why don't you share that with more people? It's like, we can't. And I did tell you, you still didn't believe me. So there is that weird, like back to your point of people sharing their experiences of the work. Um, because at the end of the day, even with the best of intentions, we're just trying to, and we're not really just trying to sell you a service, right? We mean it when we say it, but it sounds like we're just trying to sell you a service. But if your friend tells you that's the experience they had from the medicine or from us, right? It's, oh, okay, I'll give that a try. And everyone's going to have different experiences. It's challenging when people send people in when they've had experiences because they don't usually have the same experience, wrong or indifferent, because we're all different individuals. So, yeah, I think it's just an interesting piece of like how do we define it and how we try to define it. And at the end of the day, it's something that has to be experienced too. But I think that kind of ties
It does.
our holistic and body, mind, spirit, and what does that actually mean, right? That's how we hold it. And it's not a straightforward definition. You can't put it on paper. But hopefully what comes through in this is I don't even know what keep the feeling behind it, right? It's an
Yeah.
experience.
I think it's important to point out too, like the friend who comes in because a friend told them to come in, they have the experience they're supposed to have because we're going to meet them where they are. And they may not need the same thing the friend got, but ultimately that's the goal, is to set things on path
Yeah.
and help people get where they're trying to go on whatever levels, and well, sometimes on levels I'm not aware of. So yeah, but um, yeah, no, it's powerful work and it's hard to put into words. And it's also not lost on me as we continue to say how many words we don't have that we've started a second podcast. So apparently
We have
we have
some
some words. Now and again, comes out of lots of years of sitting around and having wonderful conversations in the clinic. Sometimes venting about some of the, oh man, I almost said BS that we see out there. Might as well have committed to it now.
uh,
As far as how people communicate what they do, and if I think the important piece is that it's coming from the heart and not just trying to build your pocketbook and your practice and all those sort of things. We got to pay rent. And at the end of the day, I find if we just take care of people, all that stuff takes care of itself. But it's hard for people. And I think this is more for the consumer. I think it's hard for the consumer to find what they're looking for when we're all using the same language, but we're not all doing the same work.
yeah.
And not that one, some work is better than other work, but you have to find what resonates with you and the people who resonate with you, the people who will spend time to be in it with you and in the trenches and doing that sort of stuff. Because when you get into the type of work we're doing with the veterans, and they come in for back pain too, but we end up getting into all the stuff that's the things they don't want to talk about. And we don't have to talk about them. The magic and the medicine is how it unfolds exactly as it should, and heal things that didn't realize that they were coming in to heal. But
I think we invited other practitioners, right, to define holistic for themselves. You're telling that to patients, like, what does that mean to you? I think there's also an invitation there for the layperson, the consumer, to what does that mean to you? Like when you're seeking care, what do you, what are you looking for in your provider? And as a lot of times, which I think is it's just now, and I probably knew this, but connecting those pieces, most people want to be seen and heard, right? And so when they hear the word holistic, they're like, oh, that person's going to see me and hear me. You're not really looking for holistic care. You are, but what you're looking for is for a human being to honor where you're at in your journey. Holistic doesn't necessarily that the use of that buzzword doesn't necessarily get you there. The rapport with the human sitting in front of you does. And I think that's an interesting piece of, and not everybody wants not everybody wants to be seen and heard either. There's a whole world of we can go down that rabbit hole of I want you to just be really good at your job. I don't really care. There's so many lenses, but you as a person, what are you looking for? What is the thing that when you sit with someone is that's how I know that I want to work with them. And use of those buzzwords by a provider doesn't necessarily guarantee that's the type of care that you're going to get. I think this may be unintentional, like slight pivot, but one of the things that stirred the holistic conversation for us the other day in the clinic was, and again, this isn't to necessarily pick on any one direction, but the idea of all the lab tests and all the things that are happening a lot in our area with where we are, and this idea of that getting pitched as holistic care. And we this will probably be a more gentle conversation than we had in the office the other day about it. But it's like having your labs run, having data on paper is not necessarily holistic care just because they're checking in with everything. And I one thing that we're seeing trend a lot right now is the addition of holistic is because they're asking about your stress levels and asking about your sleep. Sleep and stress are still stress is going to be the mental direction, right? That's going to be your heart, again, bringing back to like, how do you feel emotionally and how are you handling life? So that's absolutely a mental level care and body being under stress, but grouping in sleep, stress and nutrition on top of lab work and diagnosis does also doesn't equal holistic. And that feels I didn't know I was gonna say that so definitively, but that feels like a flag that I'm talk about it a little more, but that I'm willing to kind of plant in that, and I think that is one area that we're seeing a lot of things get kind of derailed and is really where some of this initial conversation came from. We see it a lot, and we're still not getting any answers. The labs are great, right? And part of our training and education was in that world. It has its place, but I do think there's a piece of that is unfortunately feels like it's drawing people in and then letting them down in a way because that's how they're having an experience of holistic care and it's still not getting them to the answers. And so it's, oh, this isn't, and that one overlaps with root cause and all of the things. But I don't know. You have any comments to that? I didn't know that was the full direction I was
Yeah,
going
I'll make some
to
comments.
go.
I think one of the beauties of the way our medicine works is, and I think this is sometimes how we compare ourselves to even the more modern version of Chinese medicine. I'm trying to say this without throwing TCM under the bus too, but I think I just
Don't do
did.
it. Don't. But
Is that there's this, let's figure out what's wrong. Let's give you a prescription of, in the acupuncture world, a prescription of points that everybody who comes in with this marker on their pulses will say, and get the story. We diagnose a pattern and everybody has that pattern, gets that set of needles. It's not really individualized care. If I have 3 different migraines walk into the office, we're going to treat 3 different migraines differently, most likely, because they're 3 different people. They're all going to get a different set of needles. There may be a little overlap, but they're going to get a different set of needles. So all of the symptoms and all of those things it's all data. The lab test that you see happening right now is it's data. It's not invaluable, but it doesn't inform how we practice. And I don't think it's terrible that people want to know. And I do think that lab testing, I'm not poo pooing the testing. Okay.
I'm right.
The testing is valuable, but so what do you do with that information? I had a patient come in the other day that brought her lab test with her, and she's been on herbs for a while, and we're making great progress with her. All the lab test did for me was reaffirm what I already thought was going on, and maybe a minor tweak or two to her herbal formula based on that lab work. Nothing crazy. And we just continue along in this process because we're early in the process. I expect some of those things to shift. If you get a set of lab results and your solution with that set of lab results is to also, first of all, the lab tests, if you do them in certain places, are just astronomical as far as cost. Yeah. And it would be an influx of cash for any practice who was doing it. And it informs a lot of things. But what we see happening is it's informing which supplements are getting sent home, which herbs they're using, and all of those sorts of things based on those lab tests as supplementation for how to correct those levels. And I don't even want to get on the high horse around that not really being, but you're just putting things in that are missing and saying, okay, it's all good now. And come back in 3 months and we'll charge you an astronomical amount of money for another set of labs, or 6 months. And then we'll adjust your supplements and we'll pump you full of IV and fluids and those sorts of things. And I'm not criticizing any of that. We had an IV program here for a while that I thought was great, but we also did it in a way to me, it's not the big picture of
What it
medicine.
doesn't account for is why it's missing in the first place. And I don't know
Right.
if that's, where you're headed, right? We want to fix the problem. And if it's causing health issues, absolutely. Let's supplement and boost so that things are running more efficiently. But we got to keep asking why it's not happening and not just say, oh, all right, here's the solution, right?
We don't want people to be on our herbs forever. If your system is running in a way to where you're deficient in this thing, and I just put this thing back into the system, what happens if I take that thing away again? Am I still going to get deficient again? Because I haven't really corrected anything. I've just leveled out an imbalance that was there. And we haven't asked the question on why it's happening.
Yeah.
And we may absolutely be oversimplifying this. I'm sure the people who run lab tests will tell me I'm oversimplifying. And it's not a knock on all the labs, because we have people right now that we're sending to a nurse practitioner in the Valley who runs labs and doesn't cost anywhere near the amount of money that it costs in other places to run labs. And I trust the clinic. I trust the people that are there. And it is informing
Yeah.
things on that level. But I think the most important piece of any of this is, okay, so now what are you going to do with this information? And if it's just about supplementation and another $300 or $400 worth of supplements on top of all of it, all the rest of it, then is it a question? I don't consider it healthcare on a lot of levels.
I had a
Yeah.
conversation with a patient last week, and this is also, it's a conversation you and I have had before. And in fact, I had never really shared that with a patient, but this particular person's been around for a couple years and in a new chapter of things. And we were having conversation around labs, no labs. Do I need to? Should I? Shouldn't I? And we had some conversation around the connection that we have, right? And their approach to that, and it being more targeted and not just be like, hey, let's run all the things for everything and let's get some information. If that feels like is a good enough answer, right? Then we can explore down that road. And you, as the patient, get to make the decision what you do with that information, whether that's medication, we can explore herbs, whatever that may be. But they were asking about my thoughts and around the bigger lab test, right? So not this clinic specifically, but they had a consult with someone else and it was going to cost them a couple grand, right? And they are in this place right now of there's just like that one piece that we haven't been able to like help. And I'm in a place where, yes, let's get some more data and information because 90% of everything else is moving in the right direction. But you have this one stubborn piece of your case that is just, I'll keep chipping away at it. But it's also, let's get some more information. And we were having the conversation about the big workup. And not everybody's got a couple grand to just drop on something that may or may not lead to any more of an answer than where we already are. So I'm excited about the connection with the clinic that we have for should that patient decide to move forward and get that information. But what came out of that conversation was like, look, I have a challenge with if I send you somewhere or you're going to go somewhere and get certain lab tests run. I feel like as a provider, I should not be able to already anticipate what your results are going to be from that clinic before you ever even get the test run. And this is going to, again, fall into that category of potentially controversial. But if I send a patient out to get labs run, I'm expecting them to come back that they are have gluten sensitivity, dairy intolerance. Oh, what's the other one? There's always three of them, right? It's gluten, dairy, and it's usually something else,
Fatigue.
adrenal fatigue, and high cortisol. Like I get it. And I'm not saying that it's wrong or it's inaccurate. There's got to be something deeper than those three things to where yeah, maybe. And are we looking beyond that? And maybe it's a starting line. This particular person happens to already be off gluten and dairy. I'm like, if I would be so frustrated for you if you go get these tests and that's all they tell you when we already know you've checked all those boxes. You're not doing any of it. And the next step is usually an elimination diet, right? I should not be able to follow this train of thought before you ever even walk into their office. And I think that is part of what is so frustrating about that disconnect, right? And it's like, what do you do with that when you're trying to help the person in front of you? And it's such an interesting yeah, it's just such an interesting piece that's and to bring that back around, like, where are we thinking about the person that's in front of us and not just I don't know, you said something that triggered that, and I was like, I gotta say it, and like I said, it's not a conversation that I have with very many patients. This particular person I just know very well, and I think that's part of the frustration and some of the stagnation in helping that, but also it does get grouped in that particular phone consultation was like, "Oh, take a holistic view to this," but you didn't, right? Like,
So a level of that predictability of it almost feels like the script at some point. Because when I'll use a different example so we don't continue. I had a person back home one time who come in all excited and I'm going to see this person and he is this and this is his resume and all the things. And what was it? It was parasites. His specialty was parasites.
yeah.
And okay, great. I said, I'm not poo-pooing that either. Give you parasites. As I dug into this particular person, I realized if what you do is health is always because there's parasites, then every person who walks into your office, you're going to find parasites. If every person, if as a society, our food is not the best in our world, you hear stories all the time about people go overseas to Italy and eat all the pasta you want, you'll have a bit of problems. So that's a topic for another day. The gluten insensitivity, the dairy, adrenal fatigue because we burn the candle at both ends. and we're just tired and our reserves are shot and all sorts of things. There are also those things in our profession. It's when I see a patient who's been to other practitioners, whether it was recently or whether it was years ago, it's always interesting to me the ones that come and say, they told me there was something wrong with my spleen. And I'm like, most of society has some spleen chi deficiency. That's just it. And it's not, we've gotten to the place where we call it the party trick. Like you can go to a party and you can diagnose because 95% of the room has spleen chi deficiency. 65% of us probably got liver chi stagnation. And the guy in the corner with a migraine has probably got liver young rising. And it's not that simple. That's where your brain starts. So yeah, are you potentially sensitive to gluten? Maybe. And dairy, obviously you've worked it out of your diet and you feel better on it, but there's still something going on.
Doesn't make it not real.
Doesn't make it
That's,
not real.
that's yeah.
But can we look a little deeper? Can we look a little further into it and say, oh, okay, what else is going on? And why? Is what's going on in your life? And what kind of things can we shift and change and can we sit and have a conversation and dig into things a little bit deeper and make a plan that goes beyond swallowing pills to get you to feeling better? How do I help you feel better? I had one recently, had all of the lab work done and hadn't got the results back from the lab work yet, and come in the door and just tell how great he's feeling. And then the lab results come through and they were a little better, but they weren't as good as he would have liked them to be, but he was feeling better. And how do we start moving the needle in a direction that doesn't just have to be
Connect patients to like feeling better is feeling better. And it's not dependent on something coming back on a piece of paper. Right. We've had people come in before and they're like, oh, like, what kind of exams are you going to run? I am the tool. And they so used to like biofeedback and muscle testing, and we're not going to go down that rabbit hole. But like all of these things. And our main diagnostic tool is us, the practitioner. And that's part of what we're so used to. If we don't see it, they can't. It's, I don't know. It's just such a,
my favorite is how did you sleep last night? And it was, well, my watch says I slept. No, really, like do you have an opinion on
how do
that?
you feel?
I had
Yeah.
another patient back home when I'd come in, or she'd come in and say, how was your week? And how are you feeling? And it was all, she always had to go through the list of things that happened to her this week to figure out, like, yeah, how are you right now? And she would ask advice and I don't know, how am I doing? I'm like, you're doing great. You're here. Like you're smiling. Like, yeah. How can we connect with yourself in a way to where you're at least, and if you're not feeling well, let's take steps to get you there.
I was gonna
Now,
say that's a lot of the work is helping patients reconnect with themselves, right? Instead of this external thing. I don't want to tell you how you're feeling today. Like I do want, like, I can give you feedback on, "Hey, yeah, I think things are moving in the right direction and XYZ and from what I see." And at the same time, like you're saying, like how do you feel? And have you ever stopped to think about it? Speaking of adrenal fatigue, right? Like one night's sleep is not going to recover you burning the candle at both ends for 20 years. I experienced that, and you don't have to go down that rabbit hole today, but from all the years of softball, like student athlete, like I had gray hair, right? Like as a child, and we didn't know anything about this world at that time. But as we started studying, it was like, but yeah, your reserves. And it took years of changing things, right? You can't just it's pouring water in a bucket and then taking the bucket and kicking it over your shoulder. At some point, you've got to start spending less what you're getting. And I use the phrase life tired with a lot of my patients. Yeah, you're sleeping, you're eating, and you're moving your body. Why am I still so tired? It's because for the last 10 years, you've been running yourself into the ground. I'm glad that we're making some changes and adjustments into the current, but that's just not going to go away overnight. You got to give yourself time. And that is, right? That's not us treating adrenal fatigue. That's us getting to know you as a person and being able to, yeah.
no amount of ashwagandha is going to help that.
And please don't do the ashwagandha. It's probably not the herb you need. Right? Like,
My body hurts. I need the turmeric.
yeah, it's,
There's a
um,
whole level of,
it's so tricky, which I think is why this this word is going to get over an hour on, on our platform. And none of it, again, is like right, wrong, or indifferent. This is purely our experience as practitioners and providers. And a lot of it is, it's intended to challenge some thought processes. If we've got providers watching this or listening to this and they're like, oh, let's, and to be clear, yeah, we have great working relationships with chiropractors. We have, as we mentioned, a nurse practitioner that we send patients to. So this isn't a, hey, only come to us, because we do outsource things. We've encouraged some of our mental health patients to have a psychiatrist and a counselor on their team, right? Like none of this is about we are the end all be all. It is simply to challenge the buzzwords and the cliches that get thrown around. And again, giving the general public an opportunity to like ask questions. We have people that come in all the time that like, how educated. There are some patients I feel like I get interviewed for the job. And that is cool. And I'm never offended by it. I think it'll chuckle out of it. And you wonder like, that they booked the appointment is not bad. But please come in. I had a patient I treated for a few years in South Carolina that a couple years in worked up the courage to ask me about my education and our background and training. And they, the whole time, thought that what, that James trained me, that no school, no education, no weekend workshop, nothing. It was the lowest level of entry point that I think I ever experienced with someone. And they were like, oh, like it's your dad. I just assumed that like he taught you some things. And I'm like, no. And on one level, like, if you like, why are you seeing me? Truthfully, you need to be asking more questions than that to people that are responsible for your health. Like, no, like, thankfully, we are trained and educated and went to school for many years, but ask the questions, right? I have somebody visiting from out of town recently that's connected to someone else who's connected to our clinic. And they were going back home and was like looking for acupuncture in their area. And unfortunately, there's no one that practices the style that we do and where they are from. And part of the was like, what questions should I ask when I'm reaching out to acupuncturists? And I gave them a couple questions to ask, not because the answers matter, but because you're going to care how they answer the question. And it's a personality test more than it is anything else. And if they're the right person for you, they won't be offended by you asking. And I truly believe that. So yeah, asking the holistic question is fun. Ask it, what do you mean by getting to the root cause? What does that mean? You should be able to answer it. That's, we'll probably get into more of that conversation as we talk more about how we practice and get started with patients. But I know recently people are asking, okay, like we got through these initial couple visits, like what do we do now? And I'm like, it depends on how you show up. Oh, you don't have, I have a game plan, but I came up with that game plan. There's no protocol for treating you. There's no roadmap that tells us how to get you where you're getting to. Yeah, it's intentional, but it's not scripted.
Based on your pulses and how you show up today. Ask good questions too. Just ask good questions. And they don't want to answer them. They're not the right person. Ask good questions so you don't have to ask Google so many questions.
Yeah.
That's a nice, this is the words to live by in our clinic is ask me anything you want to. And if you do go ask Google, come back and ask me about what Google said, because you're not in this alone. You don't have to solve it yourself. Find people that will help.
Yeah.
But this is not the conversation we planned on
No,
today.
here we are.
Honestly, we're not trying to offend anybody with some of that, with any of it, because we do love a lovely network with them. We just want the people that are within that network.
This falls under the category of why we wanted to start the podcast in the first place, right? These are conversations that you and I have around the clinic, usually in the comfort bubble of just our own lenses. And when we talked about sitting down and recording stuff, it was like, yeah, like we get into some places. So let's talk about it and see what happens. And this is one of those topics. So it'll be fun and we'll to see where it goes from there. But Yeah. This falls under the category of if you have questions, right? We'll bring this full circle. Drop them in the comments below, right? And we'll do our best to answer them. And whether that's through that or maybe it'll spark our next conversation of things that we want to chat about. So
Check out Refine 33. It's not all CrossFit.
yeah,
It's a lot. It's going to be a lot of CrossFit, but it's really about life stuff.
yeah.
And a lot of these conversations will layer in over there in a different way, but it'll be interesting to explore those ideas too.
There's
But
any curiosity and couple of things, right? What we are doing with CrossFit, like our patients, right? You walk through the gym every day, like you're here and you see it, and you may have some ideas around what you think we're doing in there. But if there's any interest in just movement, right? There's following some Facebook groups for in the area. A lot of people have home gyms, right? And they're trying to move better and all of these things because they don't feel like they fit in a traditional gym. And none of that is intended to talk you into our space. But if you are doing any sort of like weightlifting or just have a regular movement practice, that that podcast is going to be a lot of fun for some of the philosophy behind movement and different approaches and those types of things. So yeah, give us a follow.
okay.
Cool. Peace out.